Sophia started at our accounting firm 3 months ago. She was beautiful, confident, and laughed at all of my jokes. She made me feel seen in a way my wife Rachel hadn't in years. The flirt started with coffee breaks that lasted too long, then lunch, where we'd talk about anything except work. Sophia's hand would brush mine, reaching for sugar, and I started feeling alive again. Then, one night, after everyone left, she kissed me in the conference room, and I kissed her back. We started meeting in empty offices during lunch for quick makeout sessions that felt dangerous and thrilling. I told myself it wasn't really cheating if we didn't sleep together. But soon enough, the rumors started at work. I panicked and told Sophia we needed to be more careful.
Or we should stop sneaking around.
She traced her finger along my collar.
Come to my place this weekend, Dylan. We'll have real privacy. Take things all the way. I want to show you every part of me, even the ugly ones.
My heart pounded. I'd have to lie to Rachel about working late.
Then lie to her. I'll make it worth it. You'll forget she even exists.
Saturday night, I told Rachel the client presentation got moved up, and I needed to pull an all-nighter at the office. She barely looked up from her book and just told me to eat my meals on time. I showed up at Sophia's house at 8 with a bottle of wine, dressed nice, nervous, guilty, and excited all at once. She answered in a black dress that made me forget every reservation I'd had and pulled me inside. The smell of rotting garbage hit me immediately. The living room was a disaster, with trash piled in corners, pizza boxes stacked on the couch, and newspapers covering the floor. The kitchen was worse, with dishes molding in the sink and garbage bags overflowing. Sophia apologized for the mess as she took the wine unbothered and said she'd been meaning to clean. Every instinct screamed to leave. Maybe we should head out instead.
Don't be silly, Dee. I made a special dinner just for you.
The dining room table was set with candles lit. She brought out pasta, and I forced myself to eat.
Your wife, does she know? About us? About what we're doing?
Sophia smiled mid-meal. Huh? You think I'd be here if she knew?
Poor thing. Sitting home alone while her husband's here with me. Men are always the same. You want the thrill but can't handle the reality. She probably suspects. Women always know. I knew when my husband cheated.
Something about her tone made my skin crawl. I started to get up, saying maybe we should reconsider, but she held my hand.
You feel guilty. That's cute. But you're here anyway. You already made your choice, Dylan. Might as well finish what you started. Let's go upstairs.
The bedroom was worse than downstairs, with clothes everywhere, empty bottles, and that chemical smell mixing with rot. But Sophia pushed me onto the bed and climbed on top of me, kissing me hard. My hands moved to her waist. I forgot all about Rachel or the smell. I was so lost in her that I didn't see the blade until it was too late. She drove the knife right into my shoulder, and I screamed. White-hot pain exploded through my body as blood sprayed everywhere.
My husband made the same face before I killed him for cheating on me.
She giggled as she twisted the knife in. My loud shrieks filled the house while her giggles intensified.
You screamed like that too.
I threw her off and stumbled toward the door, clutching my shoulder. Blood poured between my fingers. She followed, laughing with the knife dripping blood.
Where are you going, Dylan? You came here to f*** me. Let's finish what you started. You wanted to be a cheater. Now you get to die like one.
I ran down the hallway, dizzy from blood loss, and saw a door. I threw it open and stumbled down the stairs, slamming and locking it shut behind me. I could hear footsteps overhead. She was humming an old melody as she scraped the knife against the wall. I fumbled for a light switch in the darkness. The bulb flickered on, and I froze. Some 5 men, in various stages of decomposition, were arranged against the walls. Some were recent enough that I could see their faces. They were all around my age, with wedding rings still on their fingers. The pasta swirled in my stomach, and I puked all over the floor. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I told them everything. Above me, Sophia was pounding on the door, giggling. I could hear her getting some objects to get the door open. The dispatcher told me to stay put and that help was on the way. I just prayed they'd reach me faster than she would. The door was rattling. Sophia was screaming at me. She was pissed that I had my phone, and I called the police. I pressed my jacket against my shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. The pounding stopped suddenly, and footsteps moved away. A door slammed, and a car engine roared. Police arrived 7 minutes later and found me in the basement, surrounded by corpses. Found the blood trail upstairs and evidence of at least 6 murders. Sophia's real name was Jennifer Cole. Her actual husband had been her first victim 5 years ago. Everything else was fabricated. She'd been hunting married men who strayed, seducing them, then killing them. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The knife had missed major arteries by centimeters. Rachel came and sat by my bed in silence for hours before finally speaking. She said the police told her everything about where I was and why I was there. I started to apologize, but she told me not to. She said she didn't want my apologies. She wanted a divorce. She left and filed papers that week. I didn't contest anything. Jennifer was still at large, possibly hunting under a new identity. I see a therapist now, PTSD from the attack, but it's more than that. It's guilt and shame, the knowledge that I was so willing to betray someone who loved me that I almost got myself killed. And maybe, at some point, I deserved it.
I'd been living alone in this house for just about 2 weeks. I settled in quickly, having moved for work and pretty much starting my new job right after the move. Everything seemed fine. It wasn't anything special, but it was a home nonetheless. The town I was in was the only area I could afford, and I didn't make a ton, so it wasn't the nicest. Of the people I did meet though, they all seemed like decent people also just trying to get by. Anyway, one night after getting home from work, I walked into the house and was hit by a very strong odor. I had no idea what it was or what it could have been, but it smelled rancid. I walked through the whole house and didn't find anything, and after a few hours, it seemed to go away, so I figured it was nothing. Kinda forgot about it, until the following day, when I got home from work again and smelled the same rancid odor. I did a thorough check of the entire house, top to bottom in every room, and while I didn't find anything that could have been the source of the awful smell, I did find something strange. The lock on my back door, which was a sliding glass door, was unlocked. The switch was flipped up. I knew I checked all the doors every night before going to bed, and I hadn't opened that door since I'd moved in, so I couldn't see how it was possible for it to be unlocked. I opened the door and stepped into my backyard. There wasn't all that much to see. The backyard of this house was fenced on the sides, but open in the back, where it was woods. I didn't know if there were houses back there, or if it was just a forest, but at night, all I could see were trees. I didn't get any answers. I went back in, shut the door, and made absolutely sure it was locked. I was stumped by that door being unlocked for the rest of the night. Couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew that I kept it locked, but I also knew that if that were true, and the door was unlocked, then someone else had to have done it, which I also wasn't willing to believe. Nothing was missing, and yeah, there was a strange smell, but that wasn't enough to prove to me that something was really wrong. As I sat on the couch and watched TV for the rest of the night, I told myself that now that I was aware of everything, if something else happened, I would know for sure that something was wrong and would call the police immediately. I know I'll get hate for not calling the police right away, But in the moment, I wasn't thinking this was a horror story about to happen. It was just an unlocked door that could have been a simple mistake on my part. Maybe I did go out to the backyard at some point and forgot about it. I really just didn't know. I went to bed several hours later, but I woke up in the middle of the night. I was groggy, and I didn't wake up suddenly. It was more like something gradually woke me up. And as I was gradually waking up, I thought I'd heard this loud scratching sound, like a machine buzzing, but I was still mostly unconscious while I'd heard it. And when I'd opened my eyes, the sound was gone. Right away, though, I noticed a different sound. This constant dripping, echoing through the house. Sounded like water dropping from the kitchen faucet, hitting the metal sink tub. It wasn't just a few drops either. It kept going. So I quickly realized I must have left the sink handle slightly open. Wasn't sure how I didn't realize that before bed, but I didn't really think too much about it. I was still partially asleep and not thinking straight. I dragged myself out of bed and walked down the stairs to the kitchen. There were no other sounds in the house, just the dripping water. As I got closer to the sink though, I started to pick up on that rotten, rancid smell. It was strong enough to wake me up from my half-asleep state I was in. I walked up to the sink. The water was dripping from the faucet just like I'd thought. I pushed the handle in to stop it. However, something was in the sink. I couldn't even tell what it was because I hadn't turned the lights on, and it was completely torn up and disfigured. It smelled horrible, and it looked like someone had been trying to stuff it down the drain, but had stopped in the middle of doing it before getting it all the way down. That's when I moved my eyes to the back door. Even in the dark and a few feet away, I could see that the latch was flipped up and unlocked. It dawned on me that someone was inside my home, probably in the middle of doing something with the sink, and went to hide when they heard me get up. I almost completely disregarded trying to figure out what was going on with the sink, and put all my attention on the person that I knew was inside with me. My eyes darted through every opening of the house. I wanted to turn the lights on, but I didn't want the person to know I was looking for them, or get startled and almost force them to attack me. I retraced my steps, going back into the hallway and slowly getting back up the stairs. I swear it was dead silent in the whole house. I could hear my heart beating. I quietly crept up the wooden stairs, and getting to the upper hall. Almost the instant I got there, sudden loud footsteps thumped through the bottom floor, from the room right next to the kitchen I was just in. I froze up in a panic, completely jump-scared by the sound, even though I was already sure someone else was in the house with me. The person's footsteps stopped right in the kitchen, and I heard them struggling with something, which I can assume was them forcing whatever the hell that was into the drain. And then a few moments later, the incinerator, or garbage disposal, turned on. Then it went quiet again. I was still frozen, scared to make any noise. Through the silence, I could hear a man's deep, heavy breathing coming from the kitchen. Then his footsteps moved back to the other room. I heard the sound of a garbage bag getting picked up or sorted through, and then the footsteps went back to the kitchen where I heard the back door slide open. Then it shut, and it was silent again. I got to my bedroom and notified the police. Of course, whoever the guy was down there, he had left my home and likely run out to the woods behind my house. What they found inside, though, was extremely disturbing. In the sink, the man had been shoving what investigators seemed to think were animal carcasses down into the drain. Something large, like a deer, that had been cut up into chunks so he could force it into the pipes. Which means that smell from the last few days was him having broken into my home multiple times to continue disposing of this. The big question is why? What was he trying to get rid of so bad, and why at my house? Cops' theory is he thought my home was still vacant, but I don't really buy that. I'd been there for 2 weeks and had furniture and stuff in there. They have no idea why he was doing what he was doing, though. If it was a deer or whatever, then possibly it was to try and get me to leave the home by constantly filling it with that horrible smell, like maybe the person hated me for some reason. But to me, it seems like he was trying to cover something up, getting rid of whatever that was in a way that no one could track. Or maybe he was even trying to frame me for something. I don't have any proof of that, but it's just a wild guess. Even a few years later, and in a different home, that event scarred me enough to have me still waking up some nights, thinking I smell that same rancid odor.
I want to start by saying that I'm not someone who scares easily. I grew up with 3 older brothers. I've worked graveyard shifts at gas stations. And I've always been the person in the friend group who laughs at jump scares in horror movies. I tell you this because what I'm about to describe shook me in a way that took months to work through. And I want you to understand that it's not because I'm dramatic. I was 19 when I started babysitting for a woman named Renee. She had 2 kids, a 9-year-old boy named Marcus and a 6-year-old girl named Lily. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, about 15 minutes from my apartment, in one of those subdivisions where every house looks almost identical and the streets are wide and empty after dark. Renee was a nurse working evening shifts at a hospital across town, so I'd arrive around 5 and stay until she got home, usually sometime between 11 and midnight. Marcus was a quiet, serious kid who liked building things with Legos and reading graphic novels. Lily was the opposite, loud, imaginative, constantly inventing games that somehow always ended with me chasing her around the house. I liked both of them. I'd been working for Renee for about 4 months, and genuinely felt comfortable there. The night it happened was a Wednesday in late October. Not Halloween, not that it would matter. But I mention it because the nights had gotten longer and darker earlier, and the neighborhood always felt a little more isolated once the sun went down in autumn. I'd made the kids grilled cheese for dinner, helped Lily through a bath, and was getting her settled when Marcus said something I initially brushed off. There was a man looking in the backyard window earlier. I looked up from tucking Lily's blanket. What do you mean? He shrugged, that practiced 9-year-old shrug that means they're trying to seem unbothered. When you were giving Lily her bath, I was in the living room and thought I saw someone standing on the back porch, looking through the glass. I asked if he was sure, and he said he wasn't. Said it was dark and it might have been his own reflection. I told him it probably was, locked the back sliding door, which I had assumed was already locked, and tried to move on. But I checked that door twice more before I put Marcus to bed at 9:30. By 10 o'clock, I was alone on the couch, television on low, and I was starting to feel that particular kind of quiet that settles into a house after kids fall asleep. The kind of quiet where you start noticing sounds you didn't notice before. The refrigerator humming, the occasional creak from upstairs, and then something else. It was subtle at first, a sound I couldn't immediately categorize. Not a creak, not the house settling. Something more deliberate. Like the slow, careful weight of footsteps trying very hard not to be footsteps, coming from the direction of the kitchen. I muted the television. Nothing. Silence. I told myself it was the fridge. I unmuted the TV. It happened again 10 minutes later, and this time I was certain it wasn't the fridge. It had rhythm. It had intention. I sat completely still on the couch and stared at the darkened hallway leading to the kitchen, and I felt something shift in my chest. That animal awareness, the part of your brain that predates language, telling you something is wrong. I got up and turned on the hallway light. The kitchen was empty, but the stool at the kitchen island was pulled out. Not far, maybe 8 inches. I was almost certain it had been pushed in when I made dinner. I always push the stools back in. It was a compulsive habit of mine. Almost certain isn't the same as certain, though, so I talked myself down. I went back to the couch. Then I noticed the glass. There was a glass on the counter near the sink, a clear drinking glass with maybe 2 inches of water in it. I hadn't poured that glass. I had given the kids juice with dinner, and I had been drinking from a water bottle I brought with me. I stood there staring at it for what felt like a long time, and I could feel my own heartbeat in my throat. I called Renee. She picked up on the 3rd ring, and I kept my voice low and even. I told her what Marcus had said, what I'd heard, the stool and the glass. There was a pause on her end that lasted too long. Then she said, "Is the back door locked right now?" I said yes. She said, "Check the garage." I asked her why, and she said her ex-husband, Marcus's father, not Lily's, the one she left 2 years ago and had a restraining order against, had a garage door code she'd never gotten around to changing. She said she'd been getting hang-up calls from blocked numbers all week and hadn't thought much of it. She was speaking faster now. I was already moving toward the interior garage door, and she told me not to open it, to take the kids out through the front door and go to a neighbor's house and call 911. I didn't make it to the garage door, because as I turned toward the hallway, I heard the door to the garage click. Not open, just the latch releasing, as though someone on the other side had their hand on the knob and had just decided to stop. I dropped the phone and I moved. I don't fully remember getting up the stairs. I remember grabbing Marcus from his bed and being surprised by how awake he was, like some part of him was waiting. I got Lily up, got both of them out the front door, left it wide open behind us, and ran 3 houses down to a neighbor I recognized. We were inside a stranger's kitchen when we heard Renee's front door slam shut from down the street. The police came. Renee came 40 minutes later, still in her scrubs. And I remember her hugging the kids in the neighbor's driveway while 2 officers walked through her house with flashlights. They found the water glass. They found scuff marks near the garage that suggested someone had been standing in that narrow space between the car and the wall for some time. One of the officers told me, quietly, that whoever was in there had been in there for a while. I thought about all the sounds I dismissed, all the minutes I'd sat 10 feet from that garage door, watching television, not knowing. They never confirmed it was Renee's ex. No cameras, no prints that meant anything. He denied it. The restraining order was reviewed and strengthened, for whatever that's worth. What I keep coming back to, even now, is Marcus. He saw someone at that back window and told me, clearly, calmly. The way a 9-year-old has already learned to manage fear tells an adult something important. And I locked the door and changed the subject. He knew something was wrong before I did. He'd probably known something was wrong for much longer than that. I don't babysit anymore. I don't say that to be dramatic. I just don't think I'm suited for it. For that particular responsibility of being the last line of protection for someone else's children in a house that isn't mine. In a situation I don't fully understand. Some quiet houses aren't empty. That's the thing nobody tells you until you've already learned it.